You think money fills the silence? Jonathan's voice cracked, his hands trembling as the silver spoon slipped from his grip. Do you know how many nights I eat alone? How many Christmases I sit in that dining hall with 20 chairs and not a soul to share it with? The servant's kitchen fell into a hush. His eyes, sharp and usually unreadable, now glistened with unshed tears. For once, Jonathan Hale was not the billionaire. He was just a man. The room held its breath. And then, we rewind. It was Christmas Eve, and the Hale mansion gleamed like a palace carved from winter itself. White lights draped over towering columns. The driveway glistened with fresh snow, not a single footprint marring its untouched perfection. Inside, warmth was only a trick of the fireplace. The cavernous halls were polished to shine, but empty, echoing with the loneliness of wealth. Jonathan sat before the hearth, long legs stretched out, whiskey glass in hand. 33 years old, with angular features chiseled like marble, he looked like he belonged in a magazine, yet the lines beneath his steel-gray eyes betrayed exhaustion. His tailored black suit clung to his frame like armor, each button fastened too tightly, as though holding him together. No family was coming. No fiancé, no friends. He had wealth, power, and an empire that bore his name, but not a single invitation returned a yes. In another wing of the mansion, the staff gathered in the servants' kitchen, a place alive with clatter and song. Collard greens simmered on the stove, cornbread browned in the oven, and laughter rose above gospel tunes playing on a small speaker. The air was alive, full of a joy money couldn't purchase. Marissa Cole stirred a pot, her sleeves rolled to her elbows. At 22, she carried both the resilience of hardship and the freshness of youth. Her mahogany skin glowed in the warm kitchen ledge. Her curls, tied back in a scarf, escaped in soft spirals framing her face. Though dressed in the plain maid's uniform, her figure was undeniably graceful. She hummed along with the music, shoulders swaying with an ease born of comfort in community. Unlike the mansion above, this room breathed life. She noticed Jonathan when she stepped out briefly to carry logs to the fireplace. He was alone, staring at the flames like a man drowning in them. His glass sat half empty, his jaw clenched. For a long moment she hesitated. Maids didn't speak to men like him unless spoken to. But something in his hollow gaze pierced her. So she broke the rule. "Mr. Hale?" Her voice was soft, uncertain. He didn't turn at first. When he did, his gaze sharpened, wary. "Yes?" Marissa swallowed. Her hands tightened around the bundle of firewood. "Would you like to have dinner with us? Downstairs." The words seemed to stun him more than if she'd thrown the wood at his head, his brow furrowed, lips parting as though he hadn't heard correctly. "With you?" She nodded, heat rushing to her cheeks. "Just some of the staff, nothing fancy, home cooking. I thought—" She hesitated, searching his eyes. "Maybe you shouldn't eat alone tonight." The fire snapped. Jonathan's jaw worked, caught between offense and bewilderment. No one invited him anywhere without calculating what they might gain. Yet this girl, this maid, had looked at him not like a billionaire, but like a man left out in the cold. "I'll think about it," he muttered finally, hiding behind his glass. When Marissa returned to the kitchen, the others swarmed her. "Did you just invite him?" whispered Alice, the cook, eyes wide. The room buzzed with disbelief. "You're brave," chuckled one of the younger attendants. But Mr. Reeves, the head butler, sneered from his corner, a tall, gaunt man with silver hair combed back like blades. He carried himself like the mansion's second master. "Foolish is the word," he said, voice dripping disdain. "You don't drag a man of his stature into a servant's meal. Have you no sense of place, girl?" Marissa's chest tightened. She bit her tongue, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing her shrink. Meanwhile, Jonathan sat in the great hall, her words echoing in his head. A billionaire at the servants' table. How absurd. Yet the image of her eyes, soft but steady, kept tugging at him. And for the first time in years, curiosity pulled him out of his seat. He stood, brushed invisible dust from his jacket, and began to walk toward the servants' wing. The chatter downstairs died when the door creaked open. Jonathan Hale stood in the doorway, tall and impossibly polished, looking wildly out of place among paper plates, steaming pots, and carols bouncing from a cracked speaker. Silence stretched. Then Marissa stepped forward, her voice trembling but steady. "Merry Christmas, Mr. Hale. Please, come sit." Jonathan hesitated. For a heartbeat, he nearly turned back. But something inside him, something fragile, aching, urged him to stay. He stepped inside. The room felt smaller instantly. All eyes watched him as he lowered himself into a chair at the crowded table, the billionaire's suit sharp against the mismatched plates and worn tablecloth. Marissa placed a plate before him. Collard greens, roasted chicken, cornbread. The scent was rich, warm, human. Jonathan picked up his fork, suddenly aware of how stiff his posture was, how absurd he looked, surrounded by easy laughter and simple joy. He cleared his throat, forcing words out. "It smells good." Laughter rippled, gentle, not cruel, but it stung nonetheless. Jonathan's cheeks warmed. He gripped the fork tighter. At the far end of the table, Mr. Reeves leaned back with a thin smile. "Looks rather strange, doesn't it? Master eating with the servants." The laughter died. Marissa's face flushed crimson. Jonathan's jaw tightened. For a moment, silence reigned, heavy with humiliation. And in that silence, Jonathan realized the truth. Tonight, he wasn't the master. He was the guest. The fork hovered halfway to Jonathan's mouth when the sting of Reeves's words cut through the room. Master eating with the servants. Jonathan's hand stiffened. His steel-gray eyes narrowed at the butler, but Reeves only leaned back smugly, folding his long fingers across his chest. Around the table, the staff shifted uncomfortably, glancing at one another. The warmth of the gathering dimmed beneath the weight of hierarchy. Marissa's lips parted, as though she wanted to speak, but her courage faltered under the sharpness of Reeves's gaze. Jonathan, for his part, felt the humiliation sear deeper than he expected. He had attended galas where senators and CEOs courted his favor, but never once had he felt so nakedly out of place as he did here, with a plate of collard greens cooling in front of him. The staff began to eat quietly, utensils clinking against plates. Jonathan forced himself to taste the food. The cornbread was sweet, buttery, melting in his mouth in a way no Michelin star dish ever had. Yet with every bite, he felt the wall around him grow taller. He was the intruder in their sanctuary. Reeves's voice cut through again, smooth and poisonous. "Mr. Hale is used to finer fare. I doubt he's ever had food like this." Marissa's head snapped toward him. Her big dark eyes hardened. "And what's wrong with food like this?" she asked, voice steady but sharp. Reeves arched a brow. "Nothing at all, for people like us." The air went still. The gospel tune playing softly on the speaker seemed suddenly too loud, as if it mocked the silence. Jonathan swallowed, throat tight. He could feel every gaze flicking between him and Marissa, between him and Reeves, the billionaire who had everything and belonged nowhere. His voice wavered before he steadied it. "It's good. Better than anything I've eaten in months." Marissa's lips lifted in a faint, grateful smile. Reeves's jaw ticked, his composure cracking for a second. But Jonathan caught the flicker of disbelief among the staff too. Were they laughing inside? Was this dinner, this kindness, a charity gesture to soften the image of a lonely billionaire? The humiliation sank deeper. He took another bite, forcing himself to chew slowly, deliberately, as though proving something. Yet with each mouthful, the ache in his chest grew sharper. Marissa sensed it. She leaned closer, lowering her voice so only he could hear. "You don't have to stay if it feels wrong." Jonathan turned to her, eyes storming with conflicting emotions. "And go where?" he whispered back. "Back to that empty hall, to sit alone with a drink and my silence?" For the first time, her expression softened, not with pity, but with understanding. But Reeves wasn't finished. He raised his glass, smirking. "A toast, then, to Mr. Hale, who graces us with his presence tonight. May his loneliness find company at our humble table." The words, laced with mockery, sliced through Jonathan like glass. Laughter, nervous, half-hearted, fluttered around the table. Some lowered their eyes, ashamed. Others chuckled awkwardly, caught between deference to Reeves and unease at his cruelty. Jonathan's hand trembled around his fork. He could feel his pride unraveling, the sting of being reduced to nothing but his solitude in front of people who worked under his roof. He was the richest man in the room, yet at that moment, he felt the poorest. Marissa's chair scraped softly as she stood, her back straightened, her voice calm but carrying weight. "That's enough, Mr. Reeves." All eyes turned to her. Reeves chuckled darkly. "Careful, girl. Don't forget your place." "My place," she said, her chin lifting, "is at this table. And if Mr. Hale is sitting here with us, then it's his place too." The words rang out with quiet courage, shattering the brittle air. Jonathan stared at her, stunned. No one had ever defended him, not like this. Reeves's lips curled into a sneer, but before he could reply, Jonathan set down his fork with a sharp clink. His voice, low and clipped, broke the silence. "She's right." The room stilled. Reeves's smirk faltered. Jonathan's eyes, burning with restrained fury, swept across the table. "I didn't come here to be mocked. I came because someone had the kindness to ask me to share a meal." He looked directly at Reeves, his voice icy. "And that is more than I've been offered in years." A hush followed. Reeves's face flushed, his smugness cracking. The staff looked down, suddenly ashamed of their chuckles, their silence. Jonathan turned back to Marissa, his voice softened. "Thank you." She met his gaze, and for a moment, the entire kitchen seemed to breathe again. The dinner resumed in cautious quiet, though the tension lingered like smoke. Jonathan ate slowly, forcing himself to stay, to prove, to whom, he wasn't sure, that he belonged at that table as much as anyone. But beneath the humiliation and the sting, a strange warmth began to spread. A warmth born not of wealth but of being seen, defended, and invited. The meal wore on, but the laughter that had once filled the small kitchen was muted now, clipped and cautious. Jonathan felt it, the ripple of unease that followed every word Reeves had spit into the air. His chest burned with humiliation, yet there was something else flickering beneath the surface, an unfamiliar ache, like the slow thaw of ice. He forced himself to taste every dish passed to him. The roasted chicken, tender and savory. The greens, seasoned with love. Even the sweet potato pie that Alice, the cook, placed shyly in front of him. Each bite filled not just his stomach, but a hollowness he hadn't realized was so deep. Still, the sting of their pity lingered. He could feel it in the side glances, in the way laughter hushed when his fork scraped the plate. Jonathan Hale, the billionaire, reduced to an awkward guest at his own servant's table. Marissa sat across from him, her eyes steady. Every so often, when the silence stretched too long, she would offer him a smile, small, soft, enough to remind him he was human. He wondered if she knew how much those glances kept him anchored. Reeves, of course, could not let it rest. He leaned back, swirling his glass of wine as though he were the master of this room. "Tell me, Mr. Hale," he drawled, "what does a man like you do on Christmas when there are no invitations to attend? Surely not sit by the fire alone." The jab was subtle, but it landed. Jonathan's jaw tightened. He wanted to snap back, to remind Reeves who signed his checks, who owned every brick of the house they sat in. But the weight of truth silenced him. That was exactly what he did, every year. Marissa's fork clinked against her plate. "Maybe he's here now because he's tired of that," she said, her voice firm. Reeves chuckled, a low, cruel sound. "Or maybe he's here because he craves an audience. The great Jonathan Hale, brought low enough to dine with his staff. How tragic." Laughter rippled faintly from one or two of the attendants, quickly smothered when Jonathan's eyes cut to them. His chest heaved, shame battling with fury. He opened his mouth to retort, but nothing came. And that silence, that failure to defend himself, was the sharpest humiliation of all. Marissa leaned forward, her voice trembling, though her eyes burned with defiance. "You don't get to decide who belongs at this table, Reeves." Reeves turned on her, his face twisting. "And you don't get to invite him here as though you're equals." The words struck like a whip. The room froze. Even Jonathan's heart lurched at the venom behind them. "Ma." Rissa swallowed, but she didn't back down. "On Christmas," she said softly, "everyone deserves a seat at the table." Jonathan's throat constricted. He stared at her. This young woman barely half his age. Her uniform plain, her shoulders squared against the venom of a man twice her power. And yet, she radiated strength in a way he never had. Reeves scoffed, shaking his head. "You'll regret overstepping, girl." "Enough!" Jonathan's voice cut through, low and commanding. his hand clenched into a fist against the table. "She's shown me more kindness tonight than you have in 10 years. The silence that followed was thunderous. Reeves's face drained of color, his composure slipping for the first time. The staff stared at their plates, shifting uncomfortably. Marissa blinked, startled by Jonathan's defense, her lips parting as though she wanted to speak, but she didn't. Jonathan looked around the table, his voice steady but raw. "I was invited here, I chose to come, and if anyone here feels I don't belong, say it to me directly." No one did. The only sound was the ticking of the old clock on the wall. Marissa's hand trembled slightly as she reached for her glass of water. She didn't speak, but her eyes met Jonathan's across the table. For the first time all evening, he felt something crack inside him. Not pride, not shame, but something warmer. The meal resumed, though the atmosphere was changed. Reeves sat rigid, his glare like daggers, but he said nothing more. The others began to relax slowly, conversation trickling back in small bursts. Jonathan tried to join, awkwardly at first, asking about recipes, about family traditions. His voice was uncertain, almost shy, but Marissa answered each question gently, helping him bridge the gap. At one point, Alice teased him about never having peeled a potato. To Jonathan's shock, laughter followed, this time warm, not mocking. His own lips curved into the faintest smile. For a fleeting moment, he felt like he belonged. But beneath the surface, tension still simmered. The humiliation Reeves had flung into the room lingered like smoke in Jonathan's lungs. He could sense it, the shift in how they looked at him, the curiosity, the doubt. And deep inside, a storm was gathering. Because for the first time, Jonathan Hale, the untouchable billionaire, was not being envied. He was being pitied. And that, he realized, cut deeper than any loneliness ever had. "You think money fills the silence?" Jonathan's voice cracked as the words spilled from him before he could stop them. His hands trembled, and the fork slipped from his grip, clattering against the plate. The room went still. Reeves smirked faintly, but Jonathan wasn't looking at him anymore. His gaze swept the table, at the servants who'd gone quiet, at Marissa, whose dark eyes shone with worry. His chest heaved, as though something long buried had broken free. "Do you know how many nights I eat alone?" His voice rose, raw and unsteady. "How many Christmases I sit in that dining hall with 20 chairs and not a soul to share it with?" Silence pressed down on the kitchen. Jonathan's steel-gray eyes shimmered with tears that had never been permitted to fall. He looked like a man unmasked, stripped of every layer of pride and wealth. Reeves shifted uncomfortably now, but Jonathan pressed on, the dam broken. "You think it's power to sit at the head of the table with no one to laugh with? To drink whiskey until the fire burns out because the only thing keeping you company is your own silence?" His voice cracked, and he pressed the heel of his hand against his forehead, dragging in a shuddering breath. "You think I'm some cold machine who doesn't feel it? But I do. I feel every empty chair, every closed door, every single damn Christmas I've spent alone." A fork scraped against a plate. Alice, the cook, dabbed her eyes with the corner of her apron. The others sat frozen, caught between, in shock and the ache of recognition. Jonathan laughed bitterly, the sound sharp, broken. "You envy my wealth? Fine. Take it. Take the houses, the cars, the bank accounts. I'd trade all of it, every last cent, for what you have right here." His hand swept toward the table, trembling. "Laughter, warmth, a family, someone to invite me to dinner without a headline attached." The words struck the room like thunder. For the first time, Jonathan Hale wasn't a billionaire. He was a man, alone, aching, undone. Marissa's chair scraped as she stood. Her voice trembled, but the courage in it was steady. "Everyone deserves a seat at the table on Christmas," she said softly, then louder, her chin lifting, her eyes burning into Reeves's pale face. "Even him." The butler's lips parted, but no words came. His smug composure faltered under the weight of her conviction. Jonathan stared at her, stunned. Her figure, slender but unshaken, her curls framing her glowing face, seemed almost luminous in that moment. She wasn't a maid, she wasn't staff. She was the only person in the room who had dared to see him, truly see him. The tears he'd fought for years finally spilled, tracking down his face in silence. He bowed his head, hands covering his mouth as if ashamed of the sound of his own sobs. His shoulders shook. The man who built empires, who commanded industries, wept at a humble wooden table surrounded by the very people he paid to serve him. And not one of them looked at him with mockery now. Only awe. Only grief. Only a stunned kind of reverence. Marissa moved before she thought. She walked around the table, set her hand gently on his shoulder and whispered, "You don't have to sit alone anymore." The room breathed again. Alice sniffled. One of the younger attendants brushed tears from his cheeks. Even Reeves sat frozen, pale, as if watching the unthinkable. The master of the house was brought to his knees by kindness. Jonathan lifted his head, his eyes red, his voice ragged. "Thank you." His gaze locked on Marissa, and the words broke on his tongue. "You gave me more tonight than all my wealth ever has." And in that moment, the power in the room shifted forever. The kitchen was no longer the same. Something electric lingered in the air, something no chandelier or ballroom could ever produce. Jonathan Hale, who had once been nothing but a name whispered with awe and envy, had cracked open his chest and shown them the lonely, bleeding heart inside. For a long stretch of silence, no one moved. Then Alice, her cheeks wet, set her apron down and gently slid her own plate toward Jonathan. "You need more pie," she murmured, voice thick with emotion. The room let out a nervous, tender laugh, easing the heavy air. Jonathan blinked, disoriented by the gesture. He gave a small, shaky smile and nodded, though his hands trembled when he lifted the fork. One by one, the staff began to talk again, but this time, their voices were softer, their glances toward him filled with something new, not fear, not envy, but recognition. They spoke about their children, their Christmas traditions, the hymns they grew up singing in church. Jonathan listened, drinking it in as though he were starved for every word. At one point, one of the younger attendants, Marcus, barely 19, asked timidly, "Mr. Hale, did you ever have a Christmas like this, with family?" Jonathan froze, the fork halfway to his mouth. He lowered it, eyes flickering to the table. "When I was a boy," he said, his voice distant. "Before my parents died. After that, it was just the money, the lawyers, the houses. None of it felt like this." Marissa leaned forward slightly, her dark eyes softening. "It's not the food or the house," she said. "It's the people." He looked at her, really looked, as if memorizing every word etched on her lips. But not everyone shared that warmth. At the far end of the table, Reeves sat rigid, his jaw locked tight, fury simmering beneath his pale skin. He had built his sense of importance by policing the lines between master and servant, and tonight, before his very eyes, those lines had dissolved. When Jonathan laughed, an unsteady, genuine laugh, at something Alice said about oversalting the greens, Reeves's glass hit the table hard enough to make the plates rattle. The room fell silent. "This is absurd," Reeves spat, his voice sharp. "A man of your stature reduced to weeping in a kitchen like a beggar. Do you not see how they're looking at you, with pity? You've disgraced yourself, sir." Gasps broke out. Marissa's hands clenched into fists, but Jonathan raised a hand, silencing the room. Slowly, deliberately, he stood. At his full height, towering and elegant in his suit, he was every inch the billionaire again, but his eyes were no longer cold. They burned with something human, something fierce. "You're wrong, Reeves," Jonathan said, voice ringing with steel. "For once, they're not looking at me for what I own or what they want from me. They're looking at me like I'm a man, and I'd trade every cent I have for that." The room erupted, not with applause but with murmurs, with tears, with a ripple of relief that spread like light. Reeves's face flushed crimson, his mouth opened and closed, but no words came. For the first time in years, his authority had been shattered. Jonathan turned back to the table, his voice gentler now. "If you'll let me, I'd like to stay. Not as your employer, just as someone who needs this as much as you do." Alice reached out, touching his hand. Marcus nodded vigorously. Even the quietest attendants smiled through their tears. The warmth returned, fuller, deeper, richer than before. And at the center of it all sat Marissa, her gaze locked with Jonathan's. She didn't need to speak. He already knew. She had opened the door, and he had walked through it. The billionaire had finally found his seat at the table. The night deepened, and with it, the glow inside the servants' kitchen grew warmer, fuller, like a lantern lit against the frost outside. Jonathan had lost track of time. He had never laughed so much in years, real laughter, the kind that made his chest ache. He had heard about Alice's grandchildren, about Marcus's dream to be a musician, about the old porter who carved wooden toys for the children in his neighborhood. He listened, not politely, not out of duty, but with a hunger, as if each story was a piece of life he'd been starved of. For a moment, he forgot the mansion above. He forgot the empty dining hall with its glittering chandelier and its silence. Here, in this cramped kitchen, with chipped plates and mismatched chairs, he felt richer than he ever had in his empire of glass and steel. But Reeves could not bear it. He slammed his palm against the table, his voice cutting through the laughter. "Enough of this charade!" The room went still. Jonathan turned, the warmth draining from his face. Reeves rose, his frame trembling with rage, his silver hair slick against his forehead like cold steel. "Do you not see what's happened, sir?" Reeves hissed. "You've lowered yourself. They will never respect you again. They're staff. Your employees, not your equals. And this," he gestured to the table, to Marissa, his lip curling, "this is what you've been reduced to. A man begging for scraps of company." Gasps broke the silence. Marcus muttered, "That's not fair." Alice shook her head, tears glistening on her cheeks. Jonathan's jaw tightened, but before he could speak, Reeves's voice sharpened further. "And you—" He turned on Marissa now, his words venomous. "You've disgraced yourself. A maid inviting her master to the servants' table? Do you think that makes you noble? No, it makes you arrogant, delusional. You've overstepped your station, girl." The word girl apt like a whip. Marissa's cheeks burned. For a heartbeat, shame threatened to crush her, but then she looked across the table. Jonathan's eyes, steady and burning, held hers. His tears had dried, but his gaze carried the weight of every truth he'd spoken. And suddenly, she found her voice. "No," she said, standing, her shoulders square, her dark curls trembling as she lifted her chin. "What's disgraceful is the cruelty you spit from your mouth. What's disgraceful is treating kindness like a crime." Reeves's face blanched. The staff murmured, emboldened now, their voices swelling behind her. Jonathan rose too. He stepped beside Marissa, his voice calm but cutting. "Reeves, you've mistaken your service for authority. You believed fear was respect. But tonight has shown me what respect truly looks like." He turned to the others, his voice ringing with conviction. "It looks like honesty. It looks like courage. It looks like being invited to a table when you're alone." Reeves stammered, "Sir, you're dismissed," Jonathan said. The words were quiet, but they carried the weight of finality. The butler's eyes widened, his composure shattering. You can't mean—" "I mean every word," Jonathan interrupted, his tone cold now. "Leave my house tonight. You've had power here far too long, and you've poisoned this place with cruelty." Gasps filled the room. Reeves's face flushed scarlet. For a moment, it looked as though he might argue, but Jonathan's eyes, steely, unyielding, left no room for doubt. Reeves turned sharply, his chair scraping against the floor, and stormed from the kitchen. His footsteps echoed through the hall until the sound vanished entirely. Silence hung for a beat. Then Marcus let out a shaky laugh, half disbelieving. "Did that really just happen?" Alice clapped her hands together once, firm, breaking the tension. "Good riddance," she muttered, her voice thick with tears. The room exhaled. The weight Reeves had carried for years lifted, leaving behind something freer, lighter. Jonathan looked around the table, his chest heaving, and for the first time he saw not employees, but a family. And when his eyes landed on Marissa, his gratitude was too deep for words. Snow fell softly outside the mansion, cloaking the world in silence. Inside, the servants' kitchen glowed with warmth, though the plates were now empty, and the laughter had settled into a gentle hum. The storm had passed. Jonathan lingered at the table long after the meal ended, helping Alice clear dishes, listening to Marcus strum a few hesitant chords on a battered guitar. He rolled up his sleeves, his tailored jacket draped carelessly over a chair, and for once he looked less like a billionaire and more like a man simply at home. Marissa moved quietly through the room, gathering cups, humming to herself. Every so often, Jonathan's eyes drifted toward her, not because of her uniform, not because of the curve of her figure, but because she seemed to glow with something none of his wealth could buy. A steadiness, a warmth that filled the air around her. When the last dish was washed, the staff began to drift out one by one, murmuring goodnights, smiles lingering on their tired faces. The old porter patted Jonathan's shoulder gently, as though blessing him. Marcus grinned, promising to play better next year. Alice, eyes twinkling, whispered, "Don't let it be the last time, sir." And then, they were gone. The kitchen door swung shut, leaving Jonathan and Marissa alone in the hush. For a moment, neither spoke. The faint crackle of the fireplace was the only sound. Then Jonathan cleared his throat, his voice low. "I owe you more than I can ever repay." Marissa turned, brows lifting. "You don't owe me anything." "Yes, I do." He stepped closer, his gray eyes steady but softened now. "You gave me, and something I thought I'd lost forever, a place to belong, a reminder of what it feels like to be seen." Her lips curved, almost shyly. "All I did was invite you to dinner." Jonathan shook his head. "No, you did more. You broke through walls I thought were permanent." He hesitated, his throat tight, then forced the words out. "And I want to do something for you. Not out of pity, not because I think you need saving, but because I believe in you." Marissa frowned slightly, uncertain. "What do you mean?" He reached into his pocket, pulling out a folded slip of paper, an old application she'd left on a desk once, half hidden, for a nursing program she could never afford. "I saw this months ago. You want to finish school, don't you?" Her eyes widened, heat rushed to her cheeks. That's not—" "I'll fund it," Jonathan said firmly. "Every class, every book, every hour you need. Not because you work for me, because you shouldn't have to put your dreams on hold." Tears welled in her eyes, but she shook her head. "I don't want charity." "This isn't charity," he said softly. "This is me believing in you, like you believed in me tonight." For a long moment, the room was silent. Marissa's breath hitched. Finally, she nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Then, thank you." Jonathan's hand twitched at his side, aching to brush those tears away, but he held back. This wasn't about him. They stepped outside together, into the quiet of the snowy night. The mansion loomed behind them, vast and cold, but the snowflakes caught in Marissa's curls glimmered like stars. Jonathan inhaled the crisp air, his breath clouding. He turned to her, his voice raw, stripped of every shield. "You gave me more tonight than all my wealth ever has." Marissa's lips curved into a soft smile. "All I gave you was a seat at the table." Snowflakes drifted between them, glowing beneath the lamplight. Jonathan looked at her and realized, though his empire could crumble, though the world might still see him as untouchable, he had finally found something he hadn't known how to search for. Not romance, not yet. But belonging, humanity, a beginning. Together, they stood in the snowfall, a billionaire and a maid, equals beneath the same sky. And for the first time in years, Jonathan Hale was not alone on Christmas.